You're not chasing unavailable people anymore. You're not ignoring red flags. You're not pretending you're cool with casual when you're not. You're not over romanticizing or convincing yourself that breadcrumbs count as effort. You've learned. You've grown. You stopped doing that dumb stuff. And yet, dating still isn't effortless, which is confusing, right? Because you fixed the obvious stuff. You're not making those beginner mistakes anymore. You know better now, so why does it still feel hard? Today I'm talking about the stage you're actually in. Not the one where you're stepping on rakes, the one where you're past the obvious mistakes and now you're dealing with the quieter, subtler stuff that nobody warned you about. Because you're not failing, you're just grown now. And grown-up dating has different problems. So if that sounds at all familiar, I hope you'll stick around because that's what's on the agenda. Here's the thing about beginner mistakes. They're very loud, obvious, and easy to spot. You chase somebody who's clearly not interested, and you ignore the red flag waving directly in your face. You go back to your ex for the fourth time, even though nothing's changed at all, and you convince yourself that, maybe this time is going to be different. Those are beginner mistakes. And you're not making those anymore. You've learned. You read the books, you've watched the videos, maybe even went to therapy. You've had the conversations with your friends where they looked at you and they said, "Are you serious?" And you finally listened. You got better. But here's what nobody tells you. Grown mistakes are quiet, and quiet mistakes are harder to spot because they look reasonable. Sometimes they just look like self-protection, or they look like you finally have standards and boundaries and know what you want. But sometimes you're just a different flavor of getting in your own way. Yeah, you're not stepping on rakes anymore. You're stepping into potholes. Same result, different mechanism. And that's confusing because you thought once you stopped doing the obvious stuff, dating would work. But it doesn't work like that. You just graduate to a new set of problems that require more nuance, more self-awareness. Well, welcome to grown-up dating. It's not easier, but it is quieter. So here's something you're not doing anymore. You're not justifying your boundaries. You're not explaining why you want what you want. You're not arguing somebody into understanding you. You used to do that kind of, right? You used to think that if you just explained it the right way, they'd get it. They'd see your side and they'd realize you were right. And you'd spend hours, sometimes days or months, trying to make somebody understand why their behavior hurts you. Why you can't do casual and why breadcrumbs aren't enough. And you don't do any of that anymore. Now when somebody doesn't get it, you just leave. You don't explain, you don't justify, you just recognize that this person isn't for you and you move on. That's real growth, right? But here's the thing nobody tells you about that growth. Now the work isn't explaining, it's tolerating that some people just won't choose you. And that's sometimes harder for people because when you were over-explaining, at least you felt like you were doing something. You were trying. You were fighting for it. But now you're just accepting that no amount of explaining will make them suddenly become the right person. I don't drink alcohol. You might have caught wind of that in my episode about how to date if you don't drink. But I still stock my house with the basics for when people come over. And my liquor store, they have a loyalty program. I even have the card tucked in the back of my wallet. It's right next to a Band-Aid with half a wrapper and a library card from 1972. Yeah, I know. The Band-Aid is probably dirtier than any paper cut I could imagine, but I digress. I was going to say that I have a loyalty program here, too. If you become a channel member, depending on the level, you might get a pretend cup of coffee and my undying gratitude. I'm serious. That's actually a real tier called Cup of Joe. But there are others, too. It's just a way to be a little more connected around here. The join button's right there if you want in. No, right down here to the left. Now you're in the know, so we can get back to the episode. You're not trying to win people over anymore. You're just seeing if they already are a fit. And when they're not, you let them go without a speech and without a final attempt to make them understand That's the new skill. And it's way harder than it sounds. You're not auditioning anymore. You're not twisting yourself into somebody easier to date. Ugh. You're not performing. You're not showing up as the version of yourself that you think they want. You used to do that too. You used to monitor everything that you said, edit yourself mid sentence, downplay the parts of you that felt like they were maybe too much. And you were trying to win them over and convince them that you were worth it. You don't do that anymore. Now you just show up as yourself. And if they don't like it, that's fine. That's information. You're not for them. They're not for you. Move on. And that's huge. It's real progress. But here's what comes with that. Now you have to sit in mutual evaluation without making it mean something about you. Because when you were auditioning, at least you had control. Now you're just being yourself and waiting to see if that's enough. And when it's not, when they're not interested, when they maybe pull back or when they choose somebody else, you can't blame it on a bad performance. It was just you, and they didn't want you. And that can stink sometimes in a different way because you can't fix it. You can't try harder. You just have to accept that sometimes you're not the right fit for someone, even when you did everything right. Well, that's grown-up dating, and it's uncomfortable as hell. It's good that you're not rationalizing bad behavior anymore. You're not talking yourself out of your instincts. You're not giving endless benefit of the doubt. You're not convincing yourself that that weird feeling in your gut is just anxiety or insecurity or you being too picky. You used to do that. You used to override your own discomfort because you wanted it to work out, because you didn't want to be the person who gave up too soon. And maybe everybody kept telling you that healthy relationships take work, and maybe this was just the work part, so you stayed. You ignored the thing that felt off, and you talked yourself into giving it more time. You don't do that anymore. Now when something feels wrong, you pay attention. You don't rationalize, and you don't wait for proof. You just trust your gut and act on it. That's huge. That's the thing most people never learn. But here's the grown-up part. Now you have to act on discomfort without needing a good enough reason. And that's harder than ignoring it, because when you ignored the discomfort, at least you got to stay. You got to keep dating them. You got to keep hoping it would get better at some point. And now you're just leaving early. It feels early before you have a concrete reason, before they've done anything really kind of objectively wrong. And that feels mean or paranoid or like you're sabotaging something that maybe could have been good, but you're not. You're just listening to yourself. And sometimes yourself says, this isn't right, before you can explain why. And acting on that without waiting for evidence, without building an entire case or needing to justify it to your friends, that takes a different kind of courage. The courage to trust yourself even when you can't defend the decision. That's where you are now. And it's uncomfortable, but it's also exactly where you're supposed to be. You don't attach after one great date anymore. You used to do that. You used to meet somebody and feel that spark and immediately start imagining what your life together would look like, where you'd live and what your kids would look like, and how you'd tell the story of how you met at some party. You were 3 dates in and emotionally 6 months ahead, and then when it didn't work out, you were just devastated. You don't do that anymore. Now you stay present. You take it slowly and you let things unfold in their own time without rushing ahead. And that's growth, hard-won growth. But you know what comes with it? Now you're learning how to stay open without leaping ahead. That middle space is uncomfortable because staying present means sitting in uncertainty and not knowing yet if this is going to be going somewhere. It means enjoying dates without planning the next 6 months, and that feels a little unstable. You're not detached, but you're not attached either. You're just here in the middle, waiting to see what happens. And your brain sort of hates that. Your brain wants answers. Your brain wants to know if this is worth investing in, or should you, cut your losses now. But you can't know yet. You just have to wait and keep showing up and let it develop at its own pace. That's the work now. And it's a lot harder than leaping ahead ever was, because leaping ahead felt like hope. This just feels like suspension. but it's the only way things actually build. Here's the thing nobody warns you about. Once you learn how not to get hurt, you start withholding warmth to avoid disappointment. You're a little cautious or guarded, careful not to get too excited. You're protecting yourself. And that makes sense. You've been hurt before. You've invested too much too soon, and you've been disappointed. You don't let yourself feel too much too fast. Yeah, you're playing it cool, being smart, not repeating old mistakes. Except here's the problem. When you hold back too much, you stop being generous. You stop showing up as somebody who's actually excited to get to know someone. And people can feel that. They can feel when you're keeping them at arm's length, when you're evaluating instead of connecting, and when you're protecting yourself instead of being present with them. And it doesn't feel good, so they pull back too. And now you're both just distant. And nothing happens because connection requires risk. And showing somebody that you're interested before you know for sure that they're interested back. I mean, somebody's got to go first, right? And that's scary because what if you show up all warm and open and they don't match it? What if you're generous and they're not? What if you let yourself care and it doesn't even work out in the end? Then you're going to get hurt again. Yeah, that's the next stage. And it's harder than the last one because it requires you to be vulnerable again, even though you know how much it can hurt. But that's how you actually meet someone. Not by protecting yourself, by showing up all the way, fully, even when it's scary. You're doing everything right now. You're not chasing unavailable people. You're not ignoring red flags. You're being yourself. You're staying present. And it's still hard. But I think this is what you might be missing. You're not crying in your car anymore. You're not spiraling for weeks or questioning your entire worth because one person didn't choose you. You're just disappointed, and then you move on. That's progress. I know sometimes it doesn't feel like progress because it's not dramatic. It's not a breakthrough or a before and after moment that you can post about. It's just you being a little steadier and clearer, a little more sure of yourself. And honestly, I think that's way better than fireworks because fireworks burn out. So if dating feels less dramatic, and you're not doing it wrong, you're doing it for real now. You're past the beginner mistakes and you're not stepping on rakes anymore. And it's harder because nobody's handing you a rule book or telling you exactly what to do. You just have to trust yourself and, be generous without being reckless and stay open without leaping ahead. But, I really think that you're ready for it. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. So give yourself credit for how far you've come and for what you've learned, for the mistakes that you're not making anymore. And then just keep going because the next stage, it's worth it. Hope you found that helpful. If you did, you might want to check out this episode. And don't forget to subscribe before you leave. I'll look forward to seeing you back here soon. And until next time, have a good one.